Okay, it's July 20th. It is Monday morning. I want to welcome everybody to the Wake Up and Smell the Coffee call. And a very special guest that's been on this call before. Great to get him back here. There's a lot going on daily. There's a lot of changes going on in the world economy. And I'm going to go ahead and give a proper introduction to V, the Guerrilla economist. V, and he goes by that, is a guerrilla economist who has worked for some of the top commodity trading firms and investment banks. He's also contributed to private think tanks that help create investment strategy and policy. His track record is impeccable and uncanny, as well as documented on his various radio appearances. He actually predicted with pinpoint accuracy the play-by-play of the entire Eurozone crisis that just is still going on in Greece. He also was the first to warn about Japan's disastrous economic policies and how this would be the domino effect on global economy. I'm going to put this out if you guys want to grab a pen. His website is www.rogue, and that's ROGUE, money.net, roguemoney.net. He does have a radio show with over 3 million listeners every Friday night, and this is, if you want to go to it, it's Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, every Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, and it's freedomslips.com. So freedom, one word, slips, SLIPS.com. And again, I'm excited to have him on the call this morning, and I want to just bring you out and just kind of open up on maybe the comments that are on everything that's going on right now with Puerto Rico and Greece and the changes that have happened in the last week just with the solution, so to speak, in Greece and how that's not really a solution maybe, huh? So, V, good morning to you.
Dave, Nadine, good morning, guys, and good morning to all the listeners that are listening in onto this call. I just want to thank all of you for having me on. It's an honor and a privilege.
Thank you, and welcome to the call. Welcome to the call, and let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Since the last time you were on the call, there's been some dramatic changes, especially over in Greece, with everybody kind of sucking it up and changing their minds as far as signing a contract over there. I would like you to kind of share with all of us what the results are going to be and what they are with that contract being signed over in Greece.
Absolutely. You see, Dave, the thing that people need to understand in order to get a grasp of everything that's going on around them right now is this, okay? Folks, to really understand, okay, and we as Americans, we're conditioned and programmed to think very myopically, in a very, very narrow field of view. And if I were to take every single one of you and increase your field of view, or kind of, metaphorically put you on an airplane so you see the whole entire big picture. The big picture is, folks, is there is a massive financial, geopolitical, economic war that is going on right now as we speak. There are trade wars going on as we speak. There are currency wars that are going on as we speak. The term currency wars was actually coined by me back in 2009. Just a little tidbit out there. But anyway, so these are the things that are happening right now, folks. And what's happening? Well, we in the West, that includes America, the UK, and the EU, and all these westernized countries, we have the privilege of running the show for the last, 50, 60, almost 100 years. Let's just put it that way, okay, in terms of our paper manipulations and the things that we did to create a quote-unquote global economy. Eventually, the rest of the world started catching up to the fact that aside from making paper, worthless paper, we in the West really don't produce anything anymore. And the rest of the country said, wait a minute, the old deal is we buy your paper and you buy our goods, but you are printing your paper like it's going out of style. Your printing press is running 24/7, so the paper that you have given us in exchange for a hard asset is losing value by the minute. So the country started waking up and started saying, hey, you know what, let's deal in our own currency. Let's deal in hard assets. Let's use gold. Here's an archaic concept for some people in the West. Let's use gold. And so these countries began to trade in other things besides the dollar. And that put the dollar at risk, and lo and behold, you see these Western economies that are crumbling. Take for instance, the Eurozone. Take, for instance, Greece in particular. Now, I don't know what happened in Greece. I mean, I know what happened. But what I'm trying to say is I don't know what happened to the president of Greece, Alexis Tsipras, for him to all of a sudden last minute fold like a cheap suit and capitulate to the demands of the Troika, which is the ECB, the European Central Bank, the European Union, and the International Monetary Fund. All of a sudden, this guy who ran on a platform saying, "Hey, we're going to get out of austerity, we're going to get out of debt, we're going to say no to this, we're going to stand up to the EU." All of a sudden, last minute, within 6 months, he's folded like a piece of paper. So the question becomes, what dirt did these people have on Tsipras that made him capitulate so quickly? And especially in the absolute reality and the fact that the people of Greece do not want austerity. They do not want to see their pensions cut. They do not want to see taxes raised. Let me give you an idea of what the heck's going on in Greece, folks. Do you realize they've increased their tax to 23% on processed foods, 15% on regular foods, 6% on water? These are all the demands that the Greeks have to do because of the European Union, because of the EU. I mean, this is ridiculous. These people are being bled dry, and the people are standing up against us. Now, the only solution at this point, me and the group of my team that work with me on roguemoney.net when we're tracking this kind of stuff, the solution is, I kind of posed this question on Friday night, will this be the return of the colonels? And for those that remember, back in the 60s, there was a military coup that happened in Greece to reestablish order. It was a bloody coup. Can we see a return of that? Because this is how desperate the global political climate and the economic climate is getting. It's getting that desperate. It's laughable to me, who watches the global economy daily, that when I see the G7, which I like to call the insolvent seven, the club of broke, insolvent, indebted nations, and the United States being the chief of them, trying to get together in order to create policies that the rest of the world will follow. It's a joke. And those countries that don't follow it are called terrorists, or they're hit with sanctions, or they're they have all sorts of economic and financial, in some cases military actions brought against them. That is changing. It's changing very quickly, as we've seen years ago when the Russians and the Chinese got together with the Indians and they created the BRICS alliance: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now that BRICS alliance is over 105 countries. 105 countries have decided they're going to trade, and with the eventual goal and purpose being gold being used as a trade settlement instead of dollars. These are huge moves, and the reason for that, folks, why is the world shifting to gold? Why are China right now, when they said, "Oh yeah, we increased our gold reserves by 57%, we have 3,000 tons," that's a BS lie. The Chinese have more like 30,000 metric tons. The Russians have about a little over 30,000 metric tons. And there's probably close to 40,000 metric tons that's being held by the Indian population alone. The world is buying it as a rapid clip. Why? It's a hedge of protection against what? An eventual implosion on paper currencies, primarily the dollar. That's the entire geopolitical play. When you're seeing what's happening in the Eurozone, when you're seeing what's happening in the U.S. with all the fraudulent numbers, them getting on TV and lying, "Oh yeah, unemployment rate went down, 5.5%. It's doing great." Folks, you got 94 million Americans that are permanently out of work. They can't find a job. You got almost 11 million Americans on unemployment benefits. You got 101 million Americans on some sort of welfare. You have 52 million Americans on food stamps. Not the 49 million that they tell you, but 52. That means over 50% of the country is non-effective. In other words, folks, congratulations, ding, 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 ding. You have surpassed and broken every record set by the Great Depression. You might say to yourself, well, Via, I mean, I don't see any breadlines. You don't see any breadlines because your neighbors who have been living in their foreclosed homes and haven't paid their mortgage in 2 years has an EBT food stamp card. So you don't see the breadline. It's they're on an electronic breadline. So we have all the semblances there, folks. And you need to understand that what you consider normal, what you consider every day as Americana, is held by a very, very, very thin string. And that string is starting to break. Dave.
Yeah, I got to tell you that there's a lot going on, not just in the United States, in the world, Canada, China. And I was just noticing some of the news coming out of China that they're actually controlling they're putting new rules and laws in where you can't sell, you can only buy stock. In other words, there's a new rule they put out there as far as a 5% rule is my understanding, where they're trying to limit their investors from taking a run on the stock market over there. I want you to comment if you would, because all of a sudden, and gold is the key issue right here that we're talking about. People are actually jumping over into the stock market. They're looking at the Fed's increasing interest rates and possibly gold going down, and gold has gone down as a low point since 2010. I would love to hear your professional and expert insights into what's going on with the stock markets and what's going on with gold.
Great questions, man. I love all of them. I'm glad that you asked them. Let's deal with China first. Okay, folks, the Chinese do not think like Americans. Most Americans have a memory of a goldfish. Sorry, but what we do, what happens in yesterday's news cycle is forgotten within 48 hours. American politicians are even far worse. All they care about is getting elected, and they think in 4-year terms. The Chinese think on 10, 20, 30, 40, 50-year outlines on plans. That's how the Chinese operate. So what's happening with the Chinese stock market? Okay, you got a lot of speculators got in. They started driving up the stock bubble very, very high, and then you see a crash. Now this crash that's happening, there's some evidence of some electronic tampering that's come out, and of course in conjunction with some wild speculators, the Chinese government has come in to curtail it. In other words, they're scuttling or they're culling some of their aspects of their market in order to bring down that exuberance. Okay, because they don't want to go ahead and start creating these massive bubbles, even though they knew that certain bubbles would occur in order for them to surpass the United States as the largest economy on the planet. And God's own truth, I'll tell you this, the Chinese economy is the largest economy in the world, far bigger than the United States at this point. People say, well, V, how can you say that? Well, it's simple. All the GDP numbers that are in the United States is nothing. 50% of GDP numbers in the United States is nothing but reshuffled debt. Okay? This is the only country in the world that counts government expenditure as GDP growth. It's retarded. It's the most insane thing you've ever heard. Okay? So, the Chinese know that they're going to have to curtail some of their market in order for them to continue to grow. And if you look at the policies, the monetary policies that they are doing, okay, they are moving and positioning their currency with the eventual design and the eventual desire for their currency to be backed by gold. Because we are seeing a birth of two things. We're seeing the birth of a gold-backed trade settlement note, which the yuan will be used effectively. And then a lot of people are, well, V, I've heard so-and-so talk about China's going to allow the yuan to get part of the IMF's SDR. The IMF is a useless, anybody who talks about the IMF in any sorts of means of power has no idea what they're talking about. The IMF is an unfunded white elephant. It's an empty office. It has no power. It hasn't been funded in over 2.5 years. It's a joke. It's a U.S.-dominated institution. Okay, China has no desire. They'll play the lip service game, which they do quite often. But you see them ramping up their counter. What's the counter to the Chinese IMF? The AIIB. Okay, that's the Chinese Asian Investment Infrastructure Bank. Okay, that's their counter. So China is doing everything they can to birth a gold-backed trade settlement note, which over 105 countries are behind at this point. And number two, they're birthing the petro yuan, which is the sale and the settlement of all energy products in the Chinese yuan, which eventually also will be backed by gold. Okay, it's already being done. Russia's already taking payment. Russia, the largest oil producer in the world, is already taking payment for their petroleum in gold. So it's already happening. Okay. Now fast forward to what's happening with the price of gold. All right. Now here's a clincher for you guys, and I want you folks to pay very close attention. The question, okay, the $1.5 quadrillion derivative question is this: why on earth are the countries that are broke, that have no gold, that are completely indebted, that have economies in the toilet, why are these companies that have no gold, not even an ounce of gold to themselves, and don't tell me about Fort Knox, because there's not a speck of gold in Fort Knox. That I know for a fact. Why do these countries that have none of the yellow metal, none of the gold, are involved? Why are they involved in the pricing of gold? It's hilarious to me. But every day in London, a bunch of Western banksters get together and they decide, based on no facts whatsoever, what the price of gold is going to be. And so what they do is, folks, and if you don't understand the con game, and it is a con game, it is a game that's riddled with fraud, so much fraud that regulatory agencies are starting to look into it, and even Interpol, international law enforcement agencies, are starting to look at it as well. Okay? These guys are taking a finite amount of gold, let's say a couple of thousand ounces, and they're creating millions and millions of contracts selling these 1,000 ounces of gold. So you have 10,000, millions and millions of people that have contracts out for the same amounts of gold. It's impossible. But that's the way the gold market works in the Western world. It's not based on supply and demand. It's based on fictitious numbers sold with fraudulent contracts to unwilling dupes. That's the gold market in the West. So when you want to collapse the price of gold, you're not looking at supply and demand. You're gonna dump a whole bunch of futures contracts, which lowers the price of gold artificially. In other words, the price of gold gets artificially beat down. Okay, why? You might say to yourself, well, V, why do they do this? Simple. If you're a Western banker in the UK with the Bank of England, in the US with the Federal Reserve, or in Europe with the European Central Bank, if you're a Western bankster, the last thing you want is high gold prices, because high gold prices make your currency look like for what it really is, toilet paper. So what you got to do is you got to artificially manipulate gold as well as silver prices in order to keep it low, so that the populace rely on your worthless paper and keep buying your worthless debt. That's the way the game works. But that game is coming to an end very soon. This September, only a couple of days away here. Okay, not long. But this September, China's launching their physical gold price in Shanghai. What the heck does that mean? Well, China is saying, well, you know what? Since we are the biggest buyers of gold on the planet, and so are the Russians and the Indians and the rest of the world, we're going to create our own gold price. Okay? And we're going to actually price the gold based on actual, real, physical supply and demand, not worthless contractual paper, real physical gold. All of a sudden, the Western bankers are starting to have a heart attack. All of a sudden, J.P. Morgan and Citigroup, just about 2 weeks ago, took the largest derivative positions in paper gold. Why? Because they want to crunch and beat down the market. So my call as the guerrilla economist to the banksters is, go ahead, gentlemen. Go ahead and continue to beat down the price of gold. I hope that they bring it down to pennies, because at these ludicrously low prices, they are practically gifting it to you. And the Chinese and the Russians and the rest of the world are buying it up at a rapid clip. You think they're buying it up because they're stupid? These are some of the smartest people on the planet. So every opportunity they have when the price of gold dips, they're buying it. I have photos from people in Beijing with lines, 10,000 people waiting online. You think they're lining up for the new stupid iPhone? No, they're not. They're waiting to buy gold because the price of gold just dipped that day. And in Asia, you're paying a premium. So even though it's $1,100, you're paying 20% premiums on top of that. So the premiums are going higher. Why? Because it's getting harder and harder to get. That's why this is so important. And folks, let me tell you something. You know how gold gets here? Gold gets here because of supernovas, because of stars exploding in space. That's how it gets here. It doesn't get here anywhere else. It's not man-made. It's not readily available. It's not like somebody turns on a printing press and paper currency, IOUs come out. It's not like that, folks. So this is what's happening globally. All of you, are in the middle of the biggest global transition of your lifetime. And this country that you live in is in the center of it. And it will not be the same. Gold is your hedge of protection, not only against hyperinflation, but it's the only hedge of protection against the dollar. And why? Well, thanks to your politicians and your financial mavens that run this country, they have made their own currency the most toxic asset on the planet. So that's why. Dave.
I got to ask you, being one of the, you've worked for some of the top commodity trading firms and investment banks, and you've actually been hired to be on private think tanks to create investment policy. You have an expert opinion. What is the word as far as right now, as far as moving forward with paper gold or physical gold, and basically what you recommend?
Well, anybody who wants to buy ETFs, which are basically paper gold and paper contracts, you're a fool. You're a fool, and you deserve what's coming to you. I'm sorry. I'm going to be blunt with all of you. I don't mince words. Anybody who's known me, who's worked with me, will tell you the truth. Will tell you that I don't play with words. Okay? You want to buy a worthless piece of paper saying, "Well, look at me. I got the certificate. I got 100 ounces of gold sitting in some vault somewhere." Are you kidding me? You cannot beat physical. If you don't hold it, you don't own it, is the same adage. Okay, and I also have clients of mine who buy millions of dollars worth of gold, and that we offshore in a private vault outside of the country, outside of the banking system. That's for big boy players. But if you're not going to be getting millions of dollars of gold, and you want to get a couple of ounces, a couple of ounces, 10 ounces, 12 ounces, whatever, you want to make sure you hold that. You want to make sure that you're in possession of it. Look, folks, this country has passed laws like the Dodd-Frank Act, okay, which is bigger than Obamacare and the Patriot Act combined. The banking industry spent $32 billion to make sure that the Dodd-Frank Act was passed. They put out close to 6,000 or 7,000 lobbyists. That's basically about like 5 or 6 lobbyists per congressman to make sure that this stupid act was passed. Now, what is the Dodd-Frank Act? Well, your loving government has said to you, and they've codified into law, that they will rob you blind, meaning they're willing to bail in any bank account that you have for national security reasons to keep this economy afloat. And that also goes for any gold paper that you hold in a market somewhere. It also goes for the fact that, number one. Number two, it also goes for anything you hold in this bank security box. And folks, with the stocks and everything, okay, let me tell you how the stock market works. When you buy paper gold, that paper gold is rehypothecated. In other words, you're holding a certificate, a piece of paper that says that I owe X amount of gold. Well, you don't really realize that there's Fred, Tom, Dick, and Harry, and 10,000 other guys that hold the same paper that you have to the same ounces of gold. And this game works so long as all of them don't call up the firm, they don't call up the brokers and say, "Hey, I want to take physical delivery." At that point, the firm has to shut down and go out of business. And we've seen that with MF Global and Sentinel and PFG Best. We've seen that with all these failed financial firms. So you want to take an actual physical position.
Yeah, thank you for coming out, V, and basically give us some strong words, strong advice. And basically, there's people that have actually, Skype chatted over to me. How does this affect? I mean, we're talking about the United States, maybe Canada, some of the other North American countries. Policy, is it the same for all the countries as far as what's going on with the economy, for this world economy, not just, and everyone thinks about their own economy and their own household. So how does this world economy that's going on affect the household economies? And again, you recommended putting a percentage of everybody's savings into gold. What percentage do you recommend?
I mean, not to give out any kind of financial advice over the interview or whatnot, but I'll tell you what I've done personally and what my clients have done. We've done a great deal. I mean, myself personally, 70, 80%. I mean, that's how much of a believer I am in it. Because what else are you going to put it into? Paper? You're going to buy some stocks, bonds? Are you kidding me? You realize the stock market is at it's at the level it's in, not based on any sort of reality. That's all done by high frequency trading computers. That's all done by CEOs buying and selling their own company stock to jack up the price of it. I mean, this is fraud, man. This is outright criminal fraud. In any other place, in any other time in history, these guys would be thrown in jail. They'd be executed for doing this. But over here in America, you got the bought and paid for politicians in the game place. Now, that being said, people ask me, well, what about the global economy? Folks, we in America think that we're like the center of the world. I mean, think about it. Our sports teams are world champions. World champion New York Yankees. Well, don't play baseball anywhere else besides Japan. Our fighters are world heavyweight champions. Okay, let me tell you something about the global economy. The global economy caught on very quickly to what the heck the U.S. is doing, right? And back in 2012, 2013, there was a push by over 249 countries, I think 200 some odd countries, for what's called a global currency reset. Okay, they went to the UN, they started filing the paperwork because the global economy was filled with debt. Okay, and all those countries signed on to reset the economy and hit the reset button and flush out all the debt. All the countries signed on because then, part of the GCR agreement is you'd have to base it upon the debt of the nation, the assets of the nation, and then the valuation of the currency based upon those things. All the countries in the world signed up except for one country. One country didn't sign up. Guess who? Us, the United States. And not only did we not sign up, we decided to go ahead and launch a war in the Ukraine and blame it on the Russians. That's what we do. Okay, that's the harsh reality. I'm sorry, folks. That's what we do. Okay, so the global economy, right? China and Russia, those countries, the BRICS nations, the BRICS alliances, they're not going to be affected by this. Why? They've inoculated themselves from a currency collapse. They've inoculated themselves from a dollar explosion by getting hard assets. Okay, that's what this whole thing is about. Now people will say, well, look at the TPP agreement that Obama's trying to fast track. It doesn't mean nothing. The TPP on the global level, folks, I laugh at it. I call it the toilet paper protocols instead of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The reason for that is how the hell are you going to have a trade agreement but you don't have China or the BRICS nations involved in it? Okay, what is the BRICS nations, folks? That's 80% of the GDP on the freaking planet. Okay, 65% of global manufacturing, 55% of global trade. And you're going to have a trade agreement without including those nations? No. The TPP is far more nefarious. It has more to do with capital controls and financial controls and destroying U.S. industry than it has anything to do with trade. All right, so this global economy that we're all worried about, don't worry about it. Worry about the U.S. economy. Because when this thing goes belly up, it's going to be you guys that are going to be holding the bag if you're not positioned in a hard asset like gold. And gold is the only answer. It's the only exploit you have.
I'm going to leave it at that. That's a great call, great interview. I want to thank you for being on the call, and I want to again put out your website for people that want to connect with V Guerrilla Economist. It's www.rogue, R-O-G-U-E, money.net, roguemoney.net. Radio show is every Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Freedom Slips, SLIPS.com, freedomslips.com. And V, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to get on the call with all of us and give us your strong, unfiltered words to take to heart as far as what's real and what isn't and what's going on with gold. We appreciate your time. And with that, we're going to wrap the call. You guys make it a great day. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.